Hello and welcome to the Rippling Pages. This is the podcast where we have a coffee with the world's most interesting writers to inspire your reading and your writing. And it's all crafted and curated by me, Liam Bishop. Now, what happens when you get some of the best short story writers in the world bring some of their finest work together and ask them about their craft? You get something like the book Magic and Mechanics, published by Scratch Books. This anthology about the art and the craft of the short story features writers such as George Saunders, Claire-Louise Bennett, and most excitingly, my guest today, Amber Medland. The writing process we find is frustrating, challenging. Perhaps we knew that already, but it's also at times even a little bit of fun. We're going to speak to Amber about her contribution to the anthology, Mr. Blythe Esq, as well as her writing process, and find out whether it's the magic or the mechanics that comes first. Amber's debut novel, Wild Pets, was published by Faber and Faber, and her book of non-fiction, Attention Seeker, The Truth About ADHD, her exploration of the history of attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder, was published by Dialogue Books. She has an MFA from Columbia University. Amber, thank you very much for joining me on the Rippling Pages.
Thank you for having me.
Are you based, you live in London?
Yeah, in Brixton.
Ace. Oh, very nice. Very nice. Well, it's delighted to have you on the podcast. Thank you for being here. Before we get started, just a reminder to like, share, follow, subscribe, or leave a review of the Rippling Pages if you enjoy this or any other episode for that matter. We do appreciate it. We love hearing from you as well. So do think about doing that. But otherwise, shall we get into it, Amber? And shall we start by talking about the collection as a whole? And just for you, how does it feel to be included in something like Magic and Mechanics?
Kind of unreal. Very good, but also unreal. I hadn't read George Saunders until I was on the MFA, when I realized that I hadn't read a lot of big deal American writers, and it was like a baptism of fire in the first semester. And being published alongside him after reading him for years and reading his amazing book on short stories is just very cool.
And then so there's a whole host of other writers in there. You're in there, obviously. You're in there as well. And as I understand, it was a story that you published in 2021 for the Drift magazine. So why did you choose this story? Because all those stories are pre-published, aren't they? And they've been brought together for this. Why did you choose this one to sit alongside people like George Saunders? And
two things. Tom kind of chose it rather than, he wasn't just like, Amber, pick any short story. But if he had, I would also have chosen this one because it's by far my best one. Before I wrote it, most of my short stories, it was more like rehearsing for novels. I didn't do that on purpose, but it ended up being that when I came to write my novel, I could scrap several short stories for parts and use them in the novel. Whereas I couldn't do that with this because it's actually meant to be a short story, in every way. I can't call him George. George Saunders interviewed about craft. It seems improper in some way, but when he's talking about craft and how his editing process is kind of interactive, and when he talks about tinkering, it sounds so exciting and so important. And I would love to. I feel like the way he talks about writing is how I feel when it's going its best. Yeah. I would give anything to feel like that more of the time, but I think there's a degree of taking yourself seriously that is hard to sustain in life as a writer. But yeah, I would like to be like that.
Yeah, well, there is, and I think so. That's what's great about this collection, because it's very, very people candidly talking about the challenges of writing and the tinkering, and there is tinkering. It's not magic or mechanics. Well, there's a lot of mechanics. There might be a little bit of magic. I mean, where do you fall in that bracket of magic and mechanics?
It's very much both, but the magic is unpredictable and it doesn't happen twice in the same way, and you're really lucky if you get it, but it's a bonus feeling. And it's most of the work is very much mechanics and also just really painstaking. The amount of time I spent on that one, taking out sentences and words and spaces and just obsessively going over a paragraph, which I guess is more on the mechanics side than the magic.
Yeah, I mean, reading the interviews, it is. I mean, is that what you're looking for? A feeling, not looking for it. Is it a side? Not a side effect. That's the right word. But is it a byproduct of writing? Does it come with every piece of work? Does it come with your novel? Does it come with the non-fiction that you've written?
I think so. Yeah, it definitely non-fiction is nonfiction, I've discovered, is not the same for me. It doesn't have the same. I think I'm fundamentally a fiction writer who's like dabbled in nonfiction, and like I do literary criticism, but that's also different. I think so. There's several different things. On the feeling, there's the feeling of when things are just right and everything is like pulled into the right point. And it's like when boats hum, when like if you're sailing, it's like the boats hum when you've got everything pulled into the right degree. I don't actually know why they do it, but it's like a harmony thing.
Mm-hmm.
There's that feeling that is absolutely always the thing I'm chasing, but no, it happens at the end, and it's like, or in flashes. It's a very rare and precious thing. A lot of the time, it's for me, it's just like frustration and talking myself through the frustration
Right.
and trying to not stop and trying to not just like give up because nothing is working.
Yeah, Mark Haddon speaks a little bit about that as well, doesn't he? And the dead ends, I think the way that he puts it, the dead ends that you go down with a short story, I guess, are a little bit less frustrating because they're not as long as the dead ends that you can go with on a novel. And I guess you only have a finite amount of time as a writer, in the sense that you want to get things done.
Yeah.
But should we talk a bit about the actual story then? Because it's about, funnily enough, it's not about a place of inspiration necessarily. It's about in some cases, quite a drab bureaucratic space,
Yeah.
and about somebody dictating notes for a senior manager. And there's some dark themes in the story for sure, in relation to Mr. Blythe and the narrator and their relationship. Can we just talk about why this was the setting for this story?
Yeah. I mean, so the like, I really hate the phrase lived experience, but I don't know what the real life part of it was that I was working in a job to pay my rent because all I wanted to do was write my novel, but obviously one has to pay rent. So I was working as a part-time PA, and it was a very heightened time because at work I was very bored and anxious, but then I'd like run from work to the library and work until it closed. So I was just in these like two very different states. And so, yeah, that's where the setting comes from. And I was really interested in I've always been interested in what writers do to pay the rent and how like lots of women used to like typing for men dictating letters is a very old job. Not so much now. Like I think I was honestly, even now, like with AI and stuff, I'm not sure that that job is still available. But I was interested in other writers who had done that. So I started thinking about that.
And so, did you find inspiration from accounts of this?
Yeah, I was reading, God, it was, yeah, a surprisingly long time ago. I thought I wanted to write about a fleet of women, like the women in those jobs and their relationships and what their lives were like and how they were maybe informed or distorted by being in these like quite strange not work relationships, but like if you have a boss who is unkind, it can take up a surprising amount of your mental space. And I was interested in exploring that, but then it didn't take off. And then I realized I was more interested in this one particular woman who
Mm.
emerged.
Yeah, what is that relationship about, and what do you think that's telling you, or what does that tell us about? Because it's an incredibly powerful story, and when you can see these themes, but I think perhaps for the listener, what is it about that dynamic that you are trying to sort of blow up, for want of a better word?
Yeah. Well, so I first of all, the female character, I found her very, very funny. And I often like at work, I was bored, my mind drifted. And one of my friends had been sent on a assertiveness course because she was at work. They'd sent her on an assertiveness course because she was too nice. But the thing is, like, she's very kind. She's not nice, but I think a lot of women are basically socialized to be very nice at all times, even if inside they're screaming. And I just find that fascinating as a thing. And so I was interested in that and thinking about how that functions at work and like what happens to all those repressed feelings of rage. Um, and also in the dynamic. So Mr. Blythe is well, kind of like a wealth management guy who's in charge of the kind of families where they have multiple wills and settlements and trusts and documents that involve a huge amount of money. He does those, but he doesn't use a laptop, so she types for him. But he doesn't really understand that she's a human being. And that is the extent of their relationship. But it means that there's this very asymmetric thing going on where he's just confused when she's not like a computer. Like he's just surprised if she shows any personhood, and she's very good at hiding any signs of her personhood. And that's basically the relationship.
So I guess in terms of then of that, the way that you write this experience, because the experience is filtered to some extent through the narrator's consciousness experience.
Yeah.
And the word that you use in the interview with Tom is that it's a fractured view of the world, and you try and bring around this sense of a cohesive whole. But the word that I thought about in the way that you write this is more, and you've talked about things being repressed and the ideas of mental load and this asymmetric relationship. So I was wondering more if there is something in relation to this idea of what you leave out in terms of what you tell the reader.
Yeah, that is something that I'm very interested in. And it's just like the pressure that exerts on a story. It's things like she's in a horrible, I would say, abusive relationship, but like that's never named or even acknowledged. It's just like it's very apparent, but it's amazing that the story can just kind of go along without her saying it. And like she repeats things that her boyfriend Phil has said and says that they're jokes, and like they're not funny in a story that I think is quite funny. Like nothing he has said is funny.
And rather than fractured, it sometimes looks like there is literally not sentences removed that would implicate what is happening to them.
Yes, and that very much is also when you're typing in that way, because I did take a lot of dictation, you become very aware of like what one clause or the insertion of a passive aggressive kindly like will do to a message. And so I was thinking a lot about that when I was writing.
Yeah, passive aggressive. It's kind of a way of omitting. It's a way of communicating that omitting, but also very much implying a form of it. Yeah, aggression. It's a form of aggression, isn't it? But in a passive way. And there is a lot of that. There's a lot of implication, I guess, but also very powerful. You feel the power dynamics. You feel the assertiveness of different characters.
It always amazes me how much force can be conveyed through it. That like you don't, unless you are. I would love to be someone who is just like shameless and quite insensitive. I think it would make for an easier life. It wouldn't actually, but I think life would be easier sometimes. But there's a thing where if you are sensitive to the subtext of things and to what is being omitted, it's very easy. People can exert a huge deal of power, basically, without saying things directly. Because Mr. Blythe also isn't, it's quite hard to put your finger on what exactly he's doing that is so awful, but he is awful.
Yes, definitely. And I guess for the art of the short story, then, how did you start with Mr. Blythe as an idea? Was he a person? Was it based on a real figure? Was it a depiction of a systematic issue?
It's so. Did you ever see Fantasia?
The
Conducting when someone's conducting a full color screen into all these different colors. I'm describing Fantasia incredibly badly in this moment. I guess
the Disney film.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
I haven't seen it for that many years, but I was thinking that it's a bit like that in that it's really hard to tell like what comes first. Like bits, everything you just said, those all kind of build up
right
at the same time. And so then it's more like finding a way in. One piece that came quite early was there's a bit towards the end of the story where she says there's a moment that she experiences as tender, even though nothing has happened. And she says, but like you and I, we need each other. But that is entirely in her head. Like I think what was really what I started with was the asymmetry and how much of her mental space he is occupying and dictating all the time, which is mirrored in her relationship as well. Her own thoughts and what she wants isn't very present to her, and what other people want is.
Yeah. God, that's so interesting. That's so astonishing. It's also really quite sad as well. And there is a lot in this story about power, obviously, as we've just sort of alluded to. But you talk about this is a story about negative power dynamics, and you seem to have just told us about some of those. And what would a positive power dynamic look like?
But like the tango is quite a good example of consent in action, right? Like the tango works because you know what, I can't tango. I tried once and it was a bloodbath, but like there's a basic agreement about who's doing what. And so I think positive power dynamics can very much exist, but not if they rely on they rely on things being spoken, which is like the opposite of what's going on here.
I mean, I don't know if I could quickly ask you, you're quite, you're obviously a very visionary thinker, but you're very musically inclined thinker, I think, to think about it. It's talking about the tango, fantasia, but then also I think about your novel, and it's full of these wonderful descriptions of the electronic music and how they pull the music together. And is there a kind of musicality or a metaphor of musicality that you think about when you are writing?
Yeah, I think so. For better or worse, my head is always more full of metaphors than
Right.
concrete things. It's funny with music, like, yeah, I think I've always thought about writing in terms of music. When I was like 18, I tried writing on music staves a lot, which was very interesting at the time. Now, hard to know what to do with something like that. But yes, I am very interested in it. I'm not myself. I did singing and piano and stuff when I was younger, but I'm not musical. And I can't I like hearing musicians talk about music. I find it very interesting.
For what reason?
I think it's to do with patterns and like systems of thinking and just
Mhm.
it's like this sense that if you have some light here, you have to have some shade here. It's like that kind of innate balance sense that, yeah. And I think also, yeah, I used to have a lot of friends, close friends who are musicians. And it just means that like when you're talking to young artists coming up, like whatever medium you're around most also gets in your head.
Yeah, I speak to Lucy Caldwell about this, and she said she was trained
Yeah.
as she was studied violin when she was young, and that stayed with her. And she can hear the sentences, and she can hear the rhythm of the sentences. And I can hear that. I can see that with yours. I can see how you are like this. There's a certain rhythm to your story, Mr. Blythe Esquire. There is a certain, and sometimes it's that fractured feeling. Very,
Yeah.
I don't know what the word would be in music. What would it kind of stops? There's a word for stop start, isn't there? The consonant sounds are very sort of harsh and make it sort
Yeah.
of click. And that transmits to you can hear the sentences, I guess is what I'm saying, the rhythm of them.
Yeah, and I think that's also like I've always read stuff aloud to myself, and that's like a lot of the time I can hear if something sounds right or wrong, but I couldn't I don't have another way of doing it, and I can't
Yeah.
explain on a sentence. Like I'm shit at grammar. I can't like explain actually what's happening on a language level, but I know if it sounds right or wrong, which leads to a hit and miss approach sometimes, but it's useful.
Yeah, that is the thing, isn't it? You can hear it and it just doesn't sound quite right. And I wonder if this is about, I don't know, this is a personal thing that, and I've not quite worked out this in my own work, but that something just doesn't sound right on the ear.
Yeah,
And you just don't want to sit with it, dear, and you want to change it and rehash it, rework it out.
that's the thing, and it's just like, but like when you see a choir singing together.
Mm.
They can't explain either, like how, I mean, actually they probably can because choirs, but like just the feeling of things being in harmony is a very particular thing. And I also I don't know if you can teach it. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what it is.
Yeah, that's maybe that's the power of the magic that we're talking about. But
Yeah, yeah, actually, yeah. I end up coming over slightly religious talking about it, which is also fine. But like that is the kind of region of stuff it sits with in me, in the region of souls and the yeah.
yeah, and again, I've heard this before. The more people speak to, there is that something about it that is a little bit intangible that can't quite put your finger on it, whether it's spiritual or a personal thing. It's something you can't, I don't know, teach maybe.
Yeah, it's so weird that obviously I've been thinking about this stuff for years and I mean I'm glad I don't have words for it because then I'd just be like I found the phrase and I'd just be trotting out the phrase everywhere and that wouldn't be very rewarding in the end. But it's crazy that I still don't have words for it.
Oh, well, I think it'd be interesting to know how you feel about that after the next piece of work that you're doing. But um, how interesting, how powerful, and how I mean, because you've done an MFA, haven't you? And you've been on a creative writing, master's for and what have you. So that is not taught.
No, and I think they also it was interesting actually I got called it was interesting. I got called out for being elitist quite early on, which was really new to me because it's not I'm not, first of all, but it's also not basically the idea that there's something you can't teach
Hmm.
is actually an elitist thing, which I hadn't thought about it and I didn't mean it that way. But they're not wrong at the same time. But I was also like, I didn't really know what to do with it after that. But I guess we didn't talk about MFA was very concerned with the stuff that I really, really needed to learn, and I'm very glad I did. But it's much more mechanics. That's it. It's the mechanics, and like you look at pieces of writing and you admire the magic, but it's not we can do magic here place.
It's a great experience for a writer, isn't it, to go on an MFA? But I guess, or at any creative writing course, and it can really help. And but I think there is something that it is. Well, it seems to be, as we're suggesting, a little bit untouchable, and this has come through some of the other writers that I've spoken to. I guess if you're advising, then if you were teaching, Amber, what would you say about that? How would you tell that to a student?
I mean, so I get asked about this a lot, and I just, as a caveat, I would say that I was teaching at Columbia, which meant that 2 years of it were paid for, and that is a really important thing. And while it was really valuable, and I'm really lucky I got to do it, I would not go into American style debt just because debt for a writer is a really dangerous, unless you have family money, in which case, lucky you and well done. But like going into debt, I just think a lot of us end up stopping writing because it is very, very financially hard. And I worry about people going into the debt thinking it will be paid off with like a massive first book deal, which does happen, but it is rare. And it's definitely not my, experience. Anyway, sorry, that was a tangent. I'm always aware of talking about MFAs. Like it was amazing. I just feel some responsibility to younger writers because I could see how it can feel like you'll go on MFA, you'll get a book deal, and the movie of your life will begin. And that's not like, even when it goes well, that's not how it works. Sorry, that's my little rant over on the like what I would tell people I was teaching. I think that you can teach a huge amount. I do believe there's stuff that you can't teach, but there are so many different factors that go into making a great writer. Like you can have a writer with a voice that you definitely couldn't like create in a classroom, but that doesn't mean they don't have to learn all the other stuff as well. Like everyone has stuff they need to learn and focus on. And so it's basically a question of working out what you're good at already and can just like really go all at and like perform in, and what things you need to hone so that people can hear what you're doing.
Mm. No, well, either way, I think that's both of those are very important lessons. And both of those are, and I think also the fact that writing is hard, is really hard, and you can't quantify some of the work you're going to put in, and it won't get paid off. You know, you won't pay off the debt that you accrue, but you might not even pay off the work that you put into doing something.
I think it's like you have to get to a point. I had very bad writer's block after Columbia, like really, like maybe I'll never write again, writer's block. And I don't know, I got to a point where I realized that not writing was always worse than writing. And it was just like, it's just that simple. And so everything else comes after that. And like, you have to get to a quite dark place before you realize that. But it's like, if that's true for you, then at some point you work that out.
So I think this story then became a way out of that writer's block,
The
didn't it?
story was actually, it was after the cure to the writer's block. It was after my novel. And I was more agile and like limber than I've ever been or will probably ever be since. And I was just like on a roll and I knew I had to do something else because I was so scared of the writer's block coming back again.
Yeah, do you know what? I'm not sure if I've had a writer that I've had writers that have mentioned it's really hard to write, but I've not spoke to a writer on the podcast who's given it this term writer's block, and I think we have quite a romantic image of writer's block. But what was that experience like?
It is a bit blurry. And the thing is, it's blurry because I wasn't writing. And like most of the time, like I've kept journals since I was very young. I have a huge stack of them. And like writing is how I just like make sense of things and also honestly like stay present in what's actually happening. Like when I'm not writing, I make a lot less sense. And to be clear, I don't mean like writing well. I don't mean I'm writing poetry. I mean I'm often just like literally, well, bitching about writing or not writing on paper. Like it's a lot of it's just complaining. The writer's block was I couldn't make anything new happen at all. And I try and nothing. And on the MFA, we had to churn out a short story every, I want to say 3 weeks. And now that sounds insane and like it can't be true. I think it was true during term time. That's mad. But yeah, like, yeah. And it means, you're not churning out perfect stuff, but you're getting used to the fact that like it's not going to be perfect and it's not always going to feel good, but you still do it. It's basically like a training, like going to the gym for
Routine sort of thing.
yeah, exactly. And yeah, so yeah, I guess for me, it was like not making anything new and not, yeah, it just seemed completely pointless. It was
Well, I'm
bad.
sorry to hear that. I'm glad you came out of it though. And so, and it's interesting that this story about someone getting dictated to in terms of being told to write something, write something relatively meaningless, found a way out of it for you.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I was already out of it then, but it definitely helped keep me out.
Good. Well, it sounds like a definitely a difficult experience for sure. So, thanks for sharing that, and I'm glad that you worked through it. But there is hope then for someone who might be experiencing that.
Yeah, and one thing that really helped me, and this is really corny and like not writerly and slightly embarrassing. However, the book The Artist's Way, which is all over TikTok, in fact,
Okay. Don't know that.
you're right. It's a, I believe technically it falls into the category of creative self-help, thus embarrassing. However, the thing that really helped me get out of it was in The Artist's Way, which is just that you write 3 pages of A4 every day without excuses. Like if you're hungover, if you have a headache, whatever, you write 3 pages, and your hand keeps going from left to right, and it doesn't, you don't reread it. It doesn't matter if it's a scroll. It doesn't matter if you're literally writing like, I don't want to do this. My hair is stupid. I hate my dog, like whatever. And then you throw it away. And that doing that day after day somehow broke the spell for me.
Interesting. Well, but it sounds like you're talking about just, it's not routines because you always have routines, but there is getting used to a feeling of maybe something not being that good.
Yeah, and like taking the weight off it because
Yeah,
you
yeah.
can't eat every time. You can't be looking to make art. Like that's the thing. It's so easy to sit down and be judging what you're writing and be like,
Mm,
well, this isn't as good as, and it's like, well, of course it's not because it's a first draft and like
yeah.
turning off that part of your brain, the judging part.
Yeah, that's gonna be really hard, can't it? And I think if you go on Instagram, I mean, you know, whether you go on Instagram or you go in a bookshop, you're going to see finished works of art, and everyone on Instagram or your writers or your publishers are telling you that these writers have produced something and it's a brilliant piece of work, but there is a lot of things behind the scene, isn't there? And it sounds a little bit corny, but I think this is not just a message for the the person who's never had anything published and is aspiring to be a writer. This is a message for, I think, anyone, because it can get to anyone that feeling of self-criticism, can't it? I think, especially in
Oh,
our current world.
yeah, I think it, like anyone writing in any way, published or not published, it's all like that's what's weird is the pressures don't. I definitely thought the pressures would change once I was published. And like it definitely feels better, like no doubts about that. But yeah, it doesn't get easier and like those feelings don't change.
That's interesting to know, and we can talk about that. I'd like to talk a little bit about that after the break. Okay, well, we're gonna have a quick break on the Rippling Pages. Do come back. We're going to talk more to Amber Medland about her story, about her work. We'll see you soon. Do you know that there is a Rippling Pages bookshop? My regular listeners, you'll know that there's a Rippling Pages bookshop. You might have even bought from there. It's all online and it's hosted by bookshop.org.uk. So all books from the Rippling Pages guests, including this one, Magic and Mechanics, will be on there. And all the books come from independent bookshops across the UK. So if you buy from that bookshop, the Rippling Pages bookshop, it will not only get sourced from an indie bookshop somewhere in the UK, but it would also provide me with a little 10% commission, which is fantastic. So it all goes back into the running of the podcast. So support the podcast, support indie books, support work like Amber's. Okay, let's get back into it. There's a link in the show notes, but otherwise, we're going to get back to Magic and Mechanics with Amber Medland. Amber, welcome back to the Ripping Pages. I want to talk a little bit about confidence, and that's a word that came up in your interview that I noticed it didn't come up in some of the other writers' interviews. And I wondered what then, in relation to the things that we spoke about, challenges of being a writer there, what does it mean to have confidence as a writer?
It's a really good question. I think so, like it's something that I struggle with in a more general sense, but I think everything about being confident in life, like it's just the same in writing, except everything shows up in your prose. And if so, for example, like what you said about the style being quite dependent on or like relying on these like gaps and the omissions, you have to be sure that you're having the effect that you think you are in that like when part of what you're doing is playing with space and playing with like what's not there, it's harder to have confidence because it's not just like a line of dialogue can be funny or not, or tight or not. But when what you're doing isn't like entirely on the page, that might sound a bit confusing. But you just have to kind of have a conviction to keep writing the way you do. And that's, yeah, I guess that's something I had more after my novel because I'd finished something and I'd sold it. And it was like that was my first experience of that. And so I wanted to, yeah, like while I was still kind of limber, yeah, I wanted to capitalize on that.
Because I was reading your book, Attention Seeker, which is a very different book. And there's a part in it where you mention when Joy Williams praised your story, I think when you're on the MFA.
Yeah.
And you said that's the equation, that's like being essentially proposed to by Harry Styles.
Yeah, I don't get the Harry Styles thing myself, but I've seen the way people talk about him, and it's very similar to how writers talk about Joy Williams.
We're not judge. I'm not judging it, but I think the point that you're trying to make is that yeah, there's a lot of validation in that. And someone like Joy Williams, who's a brilliant writer, who's got some short stories out this year as well, I think, from Serpent's Tail. But it just made me think about the different kinds of things that give us confidence as writers. And you've spoken there about a few intangible and intangible things that give you confidence.
Praise or even just recognition. I think people you admire reading your work can make a huge, huge, huge difference. But also just like anyone seeing like the details of what you've tried to do just feels really good because so much work goes into it all, like behind closed doors. But it's also something that there aren't many things that you can build up your confidence in without actual external validation. The external validation feels better than anything, it just does. But like you can still build up your confidence in it without it, which is pretty amazing.
Definitely. And how do you find that when it's in short supply? Do you know? Sounds like I'm asking for a bit of advice. Do you know? Do you know you do? But how do how do people sort of find that? Because it can be lacking sometimes.
Yeah, like absolutely. And always, I get that. For me, I just continually, so because of keeping a journal, which is more like a writer's diary, and that it's again a lot of complaining, but also like keeping track of how things are going and what like processes are happening. And a lot of the time for me, it comes from things like the fact that I kept going when I wanted to give up, and then something like a nice moment happened on the page. And it's just like
Mm,
a lot of it is actually just like respect for my own persistence rather than being like, oh wow, I'm really good at this. It's more like you do just get better if you keep going. And like
mm,
that to me is a sort of a kind of steely confidence.
yeah.
And it's also that for me, there becomes a point where something acquires its own heartbeat and then
Mm,
things get a lot easier because you can't really give up at that point. Like you can, but you'd be like killing something. Um,
mm. I mean, it shows, I guess, the stories have lives. Things have a life of their own. This was written 5 years ago, or published 5 years ago, and it's come back now. We're in 2026, and we're talking about it.
right.
So
And
yeah,
if you told me then that that would have been published in this, I really wouldn't have thought that was true. Like it was a very, very nice, thank God for Tom. Like it was just a very nice surprise and like, yeah, random gift from the universe.
nice. Well, yeah. Well, obviously, where do you like it? Those who haven't read it have got a new opportunity to see it in a new light. And just to come back to the story, I'm quite interested in food in your work, and because the writer makes a lot of notes about what she eats. What does this seemingly small act represent in this story?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really interested in how people relate to food and eating because I think, I mean, it's a metaphor for so many things, but like how people relate to food and eating can really often seem to me, especially when you're writing, like it works in terms of like what you will take and what you will accept from other people. And like with her, she really doesn't she's in a state of passive rage quite a lot of the time, but then she has these glimmers, these moments to herself that are like her snippets about food, I think are quite beautiful and very like separate to everything else, and she has those for herself, but they're private, and I'm so happy for her that she has them. So I think it's, yeah, basically selfhood and like a connection to something.
There's so much stuff filtering through. There's emojis, different types of like discourse coming from the outside world, the dictation of the notes, and these are moments where that you highlight. And there's one where she describes the salad that she has: vivid green, slippery, sesame oil, kelp, animal, chlorophyll. It's very sensual.
No, it's nice. Like it's nice to hear it. Yeah, and it's just like it does mean that she has this capacity for delight. Like that is something that she possesses, even if it's in
Mm.
no way in display in her life. Like I can't point at a single other like moment of the story except these moments where she shows that.
It made me think, if you don't mind, one of some of the recipes that you put in Attention Seek. If you don't, because I did really want to talk about wonderful language that you use to write about food. Your the microwave sweet potato supreme, which and the verb you use to describe making is nuke your sweet potato thing in the microwave. Can we? I don't know if this is a bit of an opportunity just to talk a bit about this book as well, but I love I love that. I love that description of it, just because of its pure boldness, but also what you're trying to say within that passage where you talk about recipes for people who might have ADHD. I think it's just a really nice way of communicating how you can get a need when there might be so many other distractions and things.
Yeah, I mean, so the whole like attention and food stuff as a whole, it's very interesting. But like with the book, so with ADHD, we have inconsistent dopamine in our brains, which means that we have reduced executive function, which is things like I always forget the list. I'm always like the list of things that are executive function are working memory, being able to focus, prioritizing, planning, all this, and like it makes cooking. When people are like, it's a really quick recipe, and then you look at the recipe and it's got like this list of ingredients and this list of steps, and it's just a nightmare. And so those recipes are basically just, they're more assembly jobs, but it's just like things that you can eat that will be an actual meal that aren't just like cheese, was the idea of it.
Yeah, I love that. A sweet potato is full of nutrition. So are
Exactly.
black beans.
All the good things.
It is full of good things. Yeah, I think you say if there's some salsa available, pop that on as well. I don't know if we can talk just a bit about the book Attention Seeker. I really enjoyed reading it. I really enjoyed learning more about. It's not just ADHD, is it? But it's a very different book, isn't it? To wild pets and to this story to some extent. But there's some themes there, I guess, we've identified that are relatively similar in how we experience food, at least.
Yeah, I think the hardest decision for me with attention seeker, and I'm still really glad I went the way I did, but a lot of people with ADHD really struggle to read. And so early on, I had a choice between writing a more lyrical, more wild pets, more like less lists, less accessible. I could have written a less accessible, possibly more stylish in terms of prose book, but I really wanted all of my hard-won, honestly, like my hard-won knowledge and my endless research. I really wanted it to be able to actually reach the people it was meant for, which meant writing in a more accessible way. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd recommend people having a read of this, because it's very interesting and very important. And I guess this is the thing about writing, isn't it? It's about choosing an audience to some extent. There's a level of polemic to it as well.
I was really trying to be, that's the thing also, like I'm normally all about like mood and subtext. And with this, I wanted to be like, no, like it is exactly what it says on the surface. Like there is no subtext, which yeah.
Yeah, and it's shocking. Some of it is absolutely shocking, and the perceptions of people and the ideas around treatments and things and the stereotypes this is fed. I would like to say the paperback's coming out.
Yeah. The paperback
Okay.
is coming out in June with a lovely blurb from Emma DeBerry, who sent one of the really, I've just had a lot of really great messages from people. And
Good.
it's like, it's again, like it's a very different audience, but the people I wanted, the people I wrote it for, basically, I'm just getting really great responses from, and just a lot of people who either haven't seen themselves, and also I interviewed 50 people and they were all like, to be clear, not all ADHD people are angels, and I don't mean like that. But as a group, it's a very compassionate, funny, with a healthy sense of absurd sort of group of people. And a lot of them hadn't been asked about their experience ever, and like gave so generously of their time and everything. Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. Good to know. And it is full of yeah, you interview people, don't you? You speak to people, and but
Yeah.
also that's talking about that idea of sort of feedback. You've had feedback from a different audience, and I bet that felt good.
Yeah, and like the thing is though, like they're not saying like I love your write. It's very interesting for me because like normally like I want to be liked for my writing. That sounds really desperate, but like that is the thing I care
Yeah,
about.
yeah.
And it's much more like about the information and about the actual like the kind of the stories and the facts.
Mm, yeah. And it's such an interesting book. And it's such an interesting book to read alongside your story and your novel for that matter, because this I like how you write about attentiveness, and there's obviously the way we've spoken today, there's so much attentiveness to your work and your craft and your writing, so much care and passion, as there is for every writer. But here today, we're hearing about that. And there's a couple of passages where you write about attention, about attentiveness as well. And you say, managing ADHD, attention becomes a form of self-defense, something we tend to like a garden, knowing its limits. If I move through the world with neurotypical carelessness, I can't imagine ever having an engaged conversation or finishing a book. And then also there's a part where you talk about the teacher. Was it your teacher or someone else's teacher?
Yeah, he was my English teacher.
Yeah, he was your English teacher, and he says love is a better master than duty.
Yeah.
And I think obviously this is about attention, but the attentiveness to work and craft, that really comes through here as well. And some really nice messages in there about that.
Yeah, I was very lucky to have him as a teacher, and he got in touch after Wild Pets came out, because it's also like, I think it's a nice thing as an English teacher when your students get published. Like it's a
Yeah.
good feedback cycle. Yeah, I think that part about attention, especially for people who have whose attention is not neurotypical, and how precious it becomes, it is really interesting. And like watching my neurotypical boyfriend, like the way he doesn't look after it drives me insane, because like the way he is like multitasking different kinds of social media and then being confused about why he feels so frazzled. Like I couldn't do that, because I, I would have a breakdown very fast. But I
Right.
knowing, like having that knowledge can really change your relationship with attention.
Wow. Well, Amber, it's been a pleasure to talk to you about your work, your oeuvre, and some of the really difficult challenges of being a writer that obviously you've had a personal experience of.
Yeah.
And I thank you for sharing that and being candid about that. And that will give a lot of hope and inspiration to our listeners, because they're, I know for sure that some of them are trying to write, but also just persevering through, through difficult, difficult challenges in, when you care about something.
Yeah. I really enjoyed this. Thank you.
Well, you can buy Magic and Mechanics. It's out now. It's published by Scratch Books. Fantastic. If you care about writing, if you care about reading, it's a wonderful book, and you really do. You get served by this interview, obviously, but you also get served by a brilliant editor in Tom, pulling apart some of these stories with the writers, such as Amber. And we have been blessed to have you here, Amber, and talk about your experience of being in this book and about writing. And then, of course, Attention Seeker is coming out this summer in paperback, but it's out now in hardback. But Amber Medland, thank you very much for joining me on the Rippling Pages.
Thanks very much.